Now, it's still my pleasure to introduce Dr. Özlem Sarıtaş, as I already said earlier, who is one of our BIAA postdoctoral fellows for 22-23. Özlem obtained her BA and MA from Istanbul University, and during her master studies already, she received a research grant from the Ludwig Maximilians University in Germany, and she then spent 2 months in Munich. Afterwards, she received a Turkish Ministry of Education scholarship and went then to Sheffield, where she pursued her second master's. 2018, she was awarded the Andrew Sherritt Fund from the University of Sheffield. And then at some point, then she moved also and did an internship in the Smithsonian University Institute in Washington, DC. She completed her PhD at the University of Liverpool in 2022. And in the meantime, she also was visitor researcher at UCL for 2 years. Now, when she did all of this, her PhD and everything, she was still found time to be involved in quite a few excavations, especially related to zooarchaeological research, and both in Turkey and in Jordan. And her research was presented at many international conferences, and she also has quite a few articles already. Today, she's speaking to us about the development of caprine and cattle herding and suid husbandry in central Anatolia, for which the settlements of Pınarbaşı, Boncuklu Höyük, and Can Hasan III have a crucial role. So this talk will present a combination of zooarchaeological analysis for Boncuklu Höyük, Can Hasan, and compared then to Pınarbaşı. A bit unusual maybe, but I would like to also several people sent their apologies. Unfortunately, Professor Douglas Baird, the excavation director of Boncuklu, Dr. Eleni Asuti, Professor Eleni Asuti, and Professor Louise Martin are very sorry that they couldn't make it. But of course, Boncuklu Höyük excavation is represented here by Dr. Gökhan Mustafaoğlu. So all good. So I would like now to give you the word.
Thank you, Lut, for the nice introduction. And as Lut already explained, I recently completed my PhD at the University of Liverpool under the supervision of Professor Douglas Baird and Professor Louise Martin. Unfortunately, they are not in Zoom today, so I will be by myself, and Gökhan Hoca is here. And so currently I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the British Institute in Ankara, and today I will summarize the zooarchaeological information that has emerged from the central Anatolian Neolithic sites of Boncuklu Höyük and in comparison with Can Hasan III. And however, the zooarchaeological analysis of Can Hasan III is still ongoing, and so I will briefly mention our preliminary results from the site. In addition, I will show our final zooarchaeological results for understanding human and animal interactions at Boncuklu Höyük and Can Hasan III by showing the relative taxonomic abundance and body part representation, dental and epiphyseal fusion, aging, sexing, postcranial and metric biometric analysis and geometric morphometrics for pig and cattle. So to begin my presentation, I first want to show my research questions. And the first questions that when I started my PhD, I asked myself, what kind of site was Boncuklu Höyük, and how could we expand our further knowledge of Neolithic hunting and possibly herding communities and their animal food resources from the faunal remains of Boncuklu Höyük. And the second question that I wanted to answer is there within the faunal data to suggest that Boncuklu Höyük and the other Neolithic sites, including Can Hasan III and Pınarbaşı, inhabitants adopted herding management in Central Anatolia during the early Holocene. And then if there are any changes, especially in the faunal spectrum and practices over at the site and over the time. And the last one, is there any symbolic precursors to, especially at Bonjour and Can Hasan in comparison with Catholic East. So to begin with, I first want to show, sorry for this red dot, I don't know why it's there. It was supposed to be in the center of Anatolia anyway. And today, so to begin with my presentation, I first wanted to show the location of the sites that I studied, Boncuklu Höyük and Pınarbaşı and Can Hasan. As you see, they are all in the center of Turkey. And Boncuklu Höyük is located on the northern edge of the Çarşamba alluvial soils in the center of the Konya Basin, and Bozdağ Hills is in the north of the site. Boncuklu sits in the center of the Konya Basin, and it's 9.5 kilometers northeast of the later Neolithic settlements of Çatalhöyük East and 30 kilometers northwest of the Pınarbaşı site. And Pınarbaşı has earlier and later occupations to Boncuklu. And why today the site sits in arid, dusty agricultural land, abundant, sorry, there is a, yeah. Why today the site sits in arid, dusty agricultural land, abundant geographical and archaeobotanical evidence shows that the Neolithic environment have been very different, with streams and extensive lakes, wetlands, and wetlands close to the site. So this picture is from Sultan Sazı National Park, which is in Kayseri, Turkey. And Doug and we visited the park last year. And it's a very nice park with the environment is very close to Boncuklu, and that's why I wanted to show it here. And this picture indicates wetland areas close to the site, but they are very relevant pictures for the Boncuklu environment. The zooarchaeological analysis also shows the occupants of Boncuklu to have exploited a wide array of large and medium size of animals and from different ecological areas. And for example, cattle and boar, they are water dependent, equids reflect capture on steppe grassland, and while the 3 species of deer. Okay, so this picture is from Sultan Sazı National Park, which is in Kayseri, Turkey, and it indicates the wetland areas close to the site. But the picture is very relevant for Boncuklu environment. That's why I wanted to put it here and wanted to show it to you. And the zooarchaeological analysis shows the occupants of Boncuklu to have exploited a wide range of animals, including large, medium-sized mammals, and from different ecological areas. For example, cattle and boar, they are water dependent, and equids reflect capture of steppeland grassland, while the 3 species of deer, which are fallow deer, red deer, and caprines. Sorry, I'm so excited. I forgot caprines. Caprines, do you know the English name? No. Anyway, sorry. And so those 3 species of deer reflect woodlands and woodland age and the clearings. So here we see Konya Plain sequence, and the recent dating analysis shows Boncuklu have been occupied from about 9,200 calibre BC to approximately 7,800 calibre BC. And it therefore predates the earliest known occupation to Çatalhöyük East and Can Hasan III. As you see here, the recent dating analysis shows that Can Hasan is dated from 7,500 to 7,000 calibre BC. And yeah. And to begin with, I wanted to show the excavation. In this slide, we see red shaded areas. They indicate the main excavation areas on the mountain's central, south, and western parts. Is an external median for food preparation area. And then our second site, which is Can Hasan III. Can Hasan was excavated in 1960 and 1970 by David French, and the trenches was located towards the center of the site, covering approximately 6% of its total area. And David French subdivided the deep sounding deposit into 9 stratigraphic units. Layer 1 to 3 comprise deposits above the floors of structures uncovered across the excavated range. And layers 4 to 9 consisted of a series of floors, field sand, and middens. Furthermore, Can Hasan's architecture is more consistent with that of mid-8-9 Millennium Boncuklu Höyük and Cappadocia than with elaborate buildings at Çatalhöyük. And here we see some old photographs by David French's team around 1969, 1970. And these pictures are from BIAA's archive, and the BIAA archive team, they kindly share it with me. And these pictures are very important because they can give us relevant information about the sampling and the retrieval methods and the excavation systems around that time. The first picture shows us the flotation system, which was done to train local people. And the second one shows us how deep trenches were there. Another old picture from Can Hasan. So to begin with, I first wanted to show our taxonomic representation from Pınarbaşı, which is epipolytic and 10 to 9 millennium site. And Caroline Middleton and Louise Martin did the previous analysis. And now Louise Martin and we are working on the new excavations materials. And the epipolytic site, Pınarbaşı in Central Anatolia, had a broad range of large animal species like cattle, equid, caprines, fox, dog, hare, and tortoise specimens. And moreover, fish and birds remain on the site. And the 10 and 9 millennium calibre BC Pınarbaşı contain aurochs, white equids, and white caprine, primarily sheep. Fishing and fowling were practices in this period based on the evidence indicating that fishing was in the local lake marshes. No morphological and demographic evidence existed for herding animals at Pınarbaşı, and both cattle and caprines dominate the assemblage. In the epipolytic, you can see caprines is almost 52%, and it is followed by aurochs, equids, and hares. And however, the picture of epipolytic changes in the 10 to 9 millennium, and aurochs becomes the dominated animal with 35%, and it is followed by caprines around 27%. And the other Neolithic site that we are working on, Bonjour, and it is the assemblage is highly fragmented, and there are almost we have studied almost 7,000 animal bones, but the number of identified specimens are around 3,585. And so at Boncuklu, boar has the highest number of identified specimens, and it appears to be the most abundant taxon, accounting for 55% of the total. The second most exploited species was cattle. You can see there on the table, and the cattle around 27%. These enormous animals would have offered the most meat to the residents of Boncuklu due to their meat weights. Equids appear to be hunted and form around 6% of number of identified specimens, and caprines are in small numbers, which is totally different than Pınarbaşı. We saw the results in the previous presentation. It is followed by large and medium-sized canids and foxes and hares. The number of identified specimens table shows the occupants of Boncuklu have exploited a wide array of large and medium-sized mammals from different ecological area. So if you put all the results together, sorry, I missed one of slide, yes. And then Can Hasan, these are our preliminary results so far. So as I said before, the zooarchaeological analyses are still going on, and the results might change in the future, but so far the relative taxonomic data from the 8th millennium Can Hasan indicate that the assemblage dominated by caprines, which are around 28%. And it is followed by cattle, around 24%. The proportion of equids and suids is higher than in earlier sites, like Pınarbaşı and Boncuklu Höyük. There's a major increase in caprine exploitation compared to Boncuklu at Can Hasan III. And Can Hasan is really important because it will span this critical period of autonomic transition. Thus, there is a clear need for detailed zooarchaeological analysis. The detailed, especially the detailed biometric and metric analysis will, on the caprines and cattle, is still going on and not ready to present so far. But in the future, the crucial period for the appearance of large-scale herding in Central Anatolia appears to be the approximately 400 years gap between the appearance of managed caprines at Aşıklı Höyük, Boncuklu Höyük, and that of the morphological domesticates at Can Hasan III. So Can Hasan III will help us to fill this gap, and by analyzing the zooarchaeological remains from Can Hasan III, we will establish the question of domestic caprines and cattle in the region. So if you put all the number of identified specimens proportion in this graph, from the first we see epipoietic Pınarbaşı, and then it is followed by Boncuklu Höyük, 9th millennium Pınarbaşı, Can Hasan III, and Çatal Höyük, and 7th millennium Pınarbaşı. Here we see that at Pınarbaşı, epipoietic Pınarbaşı, 9th millennium Pınarbaşı, Can Hasan III, Çatal Höyük, and 7th millennium Pınarbaşı, caprines are always the most dominated taxa, except at Boncuklu Höyük, which shows pig is the most abundant taxa. So especially the difference is really interesting for Boncuklu. These questions this question makes us to think if there is a domestication at the site. So the other Neolithic sites, including epipoietic Pınarbaşı and 10th to 9th millennium Pınarbaşı, we see there is a clear increase on the proportion of cattle. If you look at the first bar graph, you see the blue is quite low for cattle, and then suddenly in the 9th millennium Pınarbaşı, it increases. And this, when we saw this result, we were thinking, so what could be the reason why suddenly the proportion of cattle increases? And there are some possibilities, and the highest possibility might be in the 9th millennium, maybe the region becomes wetland, and the inhabitants of Pınarbaşı, they probably interested on hunting more aurochs than caprine. However, it is still interesting because they didn't prefer to hunt boar, which is the wetland area is specific for boar. So we will continue to analyze and try to answer this question. So to start the detailed analysis from Boncuklu Höyük, as I said before, pig are the most dominant taxa, and there are almost 55%. And the skeletal element survivorship graph, you can see in below there, it indicates that the mandible is the best represented element, and it is followed by scapula, astragalus, and calcaneum. So we can see all the elements are present, and this indicates that the entire boar carcasses were brought to the site for all the parts. And boar body parts also have a different role, and you can see in the picture above the graph, there is a human burial, and the scapula, which I show with the red arrow, from a pig, and it is specifically placed in a burial there. And at Boncuklu, male canines were routinely removed from jaws for use, and the finding of a lower jaw with tusk protruding from a mud brick wall is reminiscent of reports from Çatalhöyük and hints at a symbolic or productive role for white boar within domestic area. And so when we saw this high proportion of pig at Boncuklu, I immediately wanted to do more analysis on it. And to start with, the biometric analysis from the postcranial and the teeth are essential to understand the domestication or management of pigs. So here you can see two box plots from Central Anatolian sites. And the first one is from postcranial bones, and the second one is from the teeth logarithmic size index metrics. And these two graphs show logarithmic size index comparison with Boncuklu and other Neolithic sites in Central Anatolia. And the prevalence of pig is accompanied by a steady decrease in a postcranial and a slight decrease in teeth. At the same time, the size of the lower and upper molars of Boncuklu falls within the range of modern white boar. The overall dental and postcranial logarithmic size index metric profile of Boncuklu differs with a high degree of statistical confidence from the profiles of managed pigs from Bademecum. So the information about the pig, also the more information about the pig we got from the loose canine teeth and the mandibular and maxillary jaws. And it indicates that a higher representation of males than females deposited on the site based on canine morphology. So to continue to ask the study of pig, a better understanding of human and pig interactions at Boncuklu will emerge when the new techniques have been applied to the material, such as geometric morphometrics and the dental microwear. This was one of my doctoral research focuses, and it will be published soon. For now, we can say that the Boncuklu populations appear large and morphologically similar to the earlier sites. So far, there is no strong evidence for white boar management at Boncuklu, even though they were a major resource. The project micromorphology found only human omnivore caprines outside structures on site, so there is no also evidence of close herding or penning on site. A study of dental microwear analysis. Sorry, there's a problem. The microwear analysis on the pig incisors show that the animals were rooting for food in a coarse substrate and therefore most likely free-ranging for their food, rather than being fed by human. And moreover, on the geometric morphometrics, you see on the box plot the first one, and it indicates that the centroid size of lower second molar is stable until the 8th millennium in Çayönü late PPMB. And then there is a gradual decrease in centroid size is present. The 9th and 8th millennium Boncuklu shows that similar shapes with white boar from Hallancemi and Çayönü and Çatalhöyük. And to continue with the boar aging data, I wanted to show the aging data, and the mortality profiles based on dentition indicate that there is an emphasis on harvesting young and juvenile animals throughout the time from early to final phases. And it should also keep in mind that the sample size, especially from early and final phases, are quite small, but still we see it's a gradual decrease from early to final on the adult animals, and then there is an increase from early to late, especially on the young and juvenile animals. And then cattle is the second most dominated taxa at Boncuklu, and which is around 27%. And so what is going on with cattle, and what's the study of cattle? To answer those questions, we first did this element survivorship for cattle, and it indicates that astragalus, proximal ulna, scapula, and phalanges were the best represented elements. And then the next most represented elements are calcaneus, metapodium, and pelvis. So this graph also indicates that whole carcass were brought to the side, and like the pig. And if we look at the second box plot next to the bar graph, we see that there's a gradual decrease in the size of cattle from the 9th to 8th millennium and in the 8th millennium Boncuklu periods. However, it should be pointed out that the sample size for early and final phases are quite small. But there is a highly significant size difference between Boncuklu late phase and Çatalhöyük TP and Çatalhöyük West, which we know that the domestic cattle are coming from those two parts of Çatalhöyük. And also it is highly different than Bademaj. The logarithmic size index data from cattle indicate that they are mostly female dominant, and there's a sexual dimorphism. So the other most interesting thing about cattle, there are several examples of probably male oxen body parts receiving special treatment, such as skull and horn parts placed in domestic spaces. Most striking are the double oxen bucrania built into the wall of building 4 in area H. These two skulls were preserved very severely, and because they were so close to the ground surface, but it is still enough survey to allow us understand their replacement. And small fragments of plaster survive over the frontal of skulls, showing that they would have been initially covered in plaster. Their placement touching each other indicates that their central horn must have been removed, as we see in the next image here, which is a reconstruction of the double bucranium based on the duplicating a photograph of a far better preserved bucranium from Çatalhöyük. And this research is done by Louis Martin, and it's not published yet. The size of the least frontal breadth of one of the Boncuklu skulls places within the range of male oxen bucrania at Çatalhöyük, and it appears that the entire the Boncuklu evidence of cattle killed and cattle installations in domestic space shows that the phenomenon that so famously flourished at Çatalhöyük emerged locally in the local Konya plain, somewhere between 500 and 1000 years earlier. This adds to the many lines of evidences that support a local origin for the emergence of the Çatalhöyük megasite. And the third most dominated taxa we have at Boncuklu, it's equids. It's almost 6%. And nearly all equid bones at Boncuklu belong to small, medium-sized species, probably Equus hemionus and the onager. Only a single bone, seems to reflect a larger caprine equid horse, the white horse. The head specimens indicate that the heads were also transported along with the limbs and axial part. You can see from the bar graph there. And so more likely it appears that the entire equid carcasses also were brought to the site like pig and cattle. In below you can see phalange picture, and these are really interesting because they are coming from area J, and a catch of 8 equid first phalange figurines was found in various stages of manufacture, showing that they were probably locally made. And they are very, very similar with the work equid phalanx object that we have seen at early PPMB Jade and PPNA Mureybet in Syria, where they've been interpreted as anthropomorphic and showing parts of the human body depicted. These finds also tie Boncuklu in with the wider preparatory Neolithic world, as does the circulation of both obsidian, lithic typology, and marine shells. The small percentage of cervids we see, it's only 1%, and there is large cervid, Cervus elephus, which is red deer and fallow deer, and roe deer, caprines. The small percentage of cervid finds mainly belong to fallow deer, and cervids also show a lot of cranial parts and teeth on site, suggesting that hunting and butchery were probably at a distance, probably in woodlands on the surrounding hills, perhaps. So caprines, sheep and goat, it's almost 3% at Boncuklu, and this is quite different result than Pınarbaşı and Can Hasan III, because both sides are dominated by caprines, and we see only 3% at Boncuklu so far. But the low numbers of caprine bones were difficult to interpret since they were provided no morphometric information to help inform on their status. But the study of the stable isotopes on caprines in Central Anatolia has shed light on the Boncuklu animals. Here we see intriguing patterns of just 5 Boncuklu samples. You can see on the graph there, and plotted against Pınarbaşı Epipaleolithic white caprines. Why some of the Boncuklu samples overlap these white specimens in the bottom left, 2 have much higher nitrogen levels, similar to domestic caprines at Çatalhöyük West and East. This is interpreted as having diets affected by human intervention. We can't tell if these represented managed local white caprines or actual imports from elsewhere. Either way, it's interesting to see that Boncuklu hunter-gatherer foragers integrating caprine management techniques or manage caprines themselves into their already broad spectrum activities. And yes, wolf or dog, we can't clearly say if they are wolf or dog, so we record them as canis species. The evidence for dogs is also intriguing. While a few large dog bones suggest the hunting of wolves or dogs, other small animals indicate that the presence of domestic dogs. There is a lack of knowing or digestion at site so far. So if there is a domestication, we will more likely expect more substantial evidence of knowing or digestion. But maybe dogs were not expected or kept away from habitation and midden areas, which seems unlikely. Alongside this, one human burial, we can see below the picture of the burial of adult female. was found with a cluster of at least 4 perinatal puppies inserted into the grave. Sorry. Yes. The puppy bones were in articulation, while it's impossible to tell if they were wolves or dogs. However, it suggests that there is this kind of an affection between human and dogs at the site. And this burial is a very good example for the relationship. In the table, you can also see the bone parts, all the number of identified bones from the burial for dog. We have only one bear element. It is from lower jaw of bear. But we have interpreted a figurine found in a postal in area P as having a bear-like head and the human body, giving bears a special symbolic duality. We have very lack of evidence from the zooarchaeological analysis. It's only one. But bear symbolism goes on to become more common at Çatalhöyük, as seen in the stump seal depicting a stylus bear. But at that site too, the only actual zooarchaeological finds were teeth and toe phalanges. Again, this might indicate skins. So in conclusions, abundant large mammal resources and the mortality profile for pigs at Bonjour doesn't indicate the management of cattle, but the gradual and significant size decrease between the 9 to 8 millennium and 8 millennium Bonjour periods. And the high range of females indicates that the possibility of human control or human pressure on the population of cattle, and especially in the final period. Boncuklu Höyük residents practice one or more exploitation strategies that vary from the practice, tactics, and idealized outcomes of different model harvests. However, the aging data indicates some control targeted killing of young white boar, more likely for protecting the landscape or the settlement. And the fourth result we got from the analysis that the evidence for symbolic treatment of cattle and boar in domestic spaces of Boncuklu Höyük predated that seen to flourish at later Çatalhöyük East, providing good evidence for continuity between the early and later Neolithic in the Konya Plain. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for providing some insight in this, for non-specialists, rather difficult, in my opinion, topic. But I'm sure that there are questions from the audience here, as well as from the people on Zoom. So please, if you have questions, write your question in Q&A, and then we will answer it together. So any questions from the room? I have one, so I don't need an extra microphone. I was wondering, I mean, you said you only had a tooth of a boar that was then worked? Not boar, bear.
No, lower jaw, yeah.
And would that indicate that they were not interested in them, that there were no bears around, that they didn't eat them, or what do you think that, I mean, in your...
I think, sorry. So we have been asking the same question, why there is lack of elements from bear, because there is clearly a symbolism on bear at the site, you can see from the figurine. Mm-hmm. And this might be related with the ecological area that Boncuklu was in it. And bears, they prefer to live in the woodlands higher. The geographic places, but Bonjour was in the more wetland area. So it is possible that it was probably far for them, so they didn't prefer to hunt it, like caprines and equids and deer species, because they are very low. And deer, for example, it's like only 3%, and equids as well. So that might be the reason of why they didn't prefer to hunt.
All right.
Yeah.
Can we get the microphone here, please?
Thank you for the great presentation. And I would like to ask about artisanal activities. When you were working on assemblages, did you come across any waste material or traces or roughly shaped irregular tools?
Yes, we do. We have some work bonds from Bonjour, but it's not that much actually compared with the other Neolithic sites, including Çatalhöyük. But we have.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I didn't put the pictures, sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering. Okay.
It's for the next lecture.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for this great presentation. I most probably ask the same question many times too, but I just want to refresh my memory. Did you determine any cut marks on the bones or any evidence about the hunting strategies? Could you tell us something about that?
Yes, we have some cut marks from the bones, and there is also high proportion of marrow extractions at the site, and the butchery analysis show that the Boncuklu people, they were butchering the bones highly, so it's around I will say approximately it's 30% of the assemblage, and from those specimens, mostly they butchered for marrow extraction and chopped, and mostly chopped longitudinally and removed the marrow from the inside of the bones. Yeah, but the marrow extraction, and because of the high dominance of pig, mostly they did it for pig, and it is followed by for cattle. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
While the audience here is thinking a bit more on questions, let's go to the chat. Elizabeth Kölük asks, says, you mentioned the finds of puppy bones in a single grave. Were there any other such finds? And if yes, could this be an indicator for keeping pets? Or should these pet puppies be viewed as grave goods and votives?
I think for Central Anatolia, as far as I remember, I don't think there is another example for puppy burial, puppy graves with human burial. But yeah, it could be an indication of keeping pets or grave goods. But I think we believe it is kind of a close relationship between human and dogs, and because yeah, I mean we haven't answered this question. Sorry, I can't say if it is for grave goods or if it is a sign of domestication, but it is still interesting because this can give us a clue about or evidence about the close relationship between human and puppies or dogs. Yeah. But I'm sorry, there is no clear evidence because we haven't done any morphological analysis, but the DNA, the genomic analysis are still ongoing, and I think we will know the clear answer from the genetic analysis if they were domestic or not.
All right, but it's only once, no, that they occur,
Yes.
puppies in the graves. So. All right, the pig and deer data are clearly very different, asked Graham Barker. Why would pigs be a threat to the landscape, but not deer?
I think we believe, they were probably protecting their croplands from pigs, and that's why it could be a trait for the landscape or the resources, environmental resources that the Boncuklu inhabitants were using. So this might be the reason that the pigs were trait for the people in that time. And
so why not deer?
as I said in my slide, as I show the ecological, geological, and archaeobotanical analysis show that the Boncuklu was in wetland area, so woodlands were quite far from Boncuklu. So this might be the reason why they didn't prefer to hunt. Because if you look at the results from Can Hasan, there is a high proportion of deer, especially red deer, and so this might be the indication.
Okay.
I think we passed some questions.
I passed, Elizabeth said, thank you. Wait,
We passed, yes.
all right, Adnan Baysal asks, since the ecological environment it changes not much over a 2 to 3K time span, probably wait a minute, not much changing over the 2 to 3 times, probably the changes occur in time. So it means complete change. So not much changing occurs over 2,000 to 3,000 years time span. So probably the changes do not occur in time. Wait a second, now you got rid of the question. Sorry, we are finding Adnan's question again. Yeah, so that means that the changes are based on animal herding, controlling mainly economic approach and site-based initiative, or are they illustrating choices? If so, what was the reason for those choices, probably? Right. For those choices, I mean.
So the ecological environment, I think it changes. So in the Epipaleolithic, I think the climate, it was quite different than 10 to 9 millennium. So I'm trying to understand the question. Sorry, probably the changes occur in time. So is that means completely changes based on animal herding? Okay.
Maybe you can say how you think it is.
Do you want to ask by yourself?
No.
No. Okay.
That's not possible. I think that Adnan probably added something. No. All right. Sorry for this. Then we are going down or up. Thank you. The cursor doesn't really work very well in this computer. Yeah. Okay, let's click.
Burcu can ask the question.
Okay, you ask the question, Burcu.
Okay. Trevor Watkins asks, given the weight of an oryx carcass, several hundred kilograms, were you surprised to find that all skeletal elements were present? Do you know any other sites where whole carcasses of large mammals have been found?
Yes. Thank you for asking. Yes, we were actually quite surprised to see the complete aurochs, because the size of aurochs, we know that it's quite large. I can show you from this slide, and you can see below, and it is almost similar size with human size. So it was quite interesting because it is quite heavy, and carrying this size of cattle to site, it must probably take higher effort. So yes.
Are there other examples?
I think as far as I remember, at Çatalhöyük, they were brought to the site complete, but I don't know. There is no evidence from Pınarbaşı, and I haven't completed the results for Can Hasan, so I can't say for now. For Central Anatolia, I think Çatal Höyük has complete carcasses for cattle.
Green Barker has a follow-up question on that. Are very large animals being killed at a distance and brought to the site as carcasses, or were the kills organized to be close by?
Can I see the question by myself as well?
That's bottom row. It's the last question on the chat.
Okay.
That's the one. Okay.
I think that's it. Grambart.
Yes, but he's referring
Yeah,
to...
sorry. No. Trevor Watkins, he says, sorry. So I think they were probably killed close to the site because it's wetland area, and we know that both boar and aurochs, they prefer to live in the wetland area. So the site was also in the wetland, and we don't think they were hunting the especially aurochs and boar this far. And well, it is possible that the kills organized to be close by. Yeah. Sorry.
Evangelia Pishkin thanks you for your nice presentation, so rich in data. And she says, I was wondering about foxes in 10th and 9th millennium Pınarbaşı. It seems that their hunting increased much. Why would that be? Would you connect it with some indications in other sites too?
I think we also see similar patterns at Bonjour as well, from the early to late phases. The proportion of photos increase. So this could be related with the broad spectrum at the site, and but it might be also possible that they were consuming them as food. So well, so far I haven't looked at it very detailed, so I don't know other sites. But for Pınarbaşı and Can Hasan, and especially for Pınarbaşı, Boncuklu, and Can Hasan, we saw similar results between both Boncuklu and Pınarbaşı. But I don't have the clear phasings for Can Hasan yet, so I can't say anything for it.
There was a question in the Q&A as well.
That's the same one.
That's the same one. Okay. Any more questions here in the room? Yes, please.
Is this the illustration of the Millennium corner? Is that comparative?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
The
size of the
So the question is whether the aurochs and the human being in the picture on the screen, whether that is in correct proportions.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we believe based on the metric and biometric analysis, the size of the cattle aurochs is similar, like this picture.
Smaller, is that correct? I mean, smaller than they are today.
You have to repeat the question.
It appears that the oxen are
So
even
the
larger than
follow-up question is that the human beings in that period were also smaller. So probably the aurochs is larger and the people smaller.
I don't know about the human because I'm not working on it, but for aurochs, we know that the size of aurochs were larger, quite larger. Yes, and also it's a wetland area, so it's normal that the size of the aurochs is big. Yeah.
One more.
Yes, please.
And
Thank you, Graham.
is this cat? Are these cattle? Have they developed differently? Are these cattle? I don't recall ever seeing cattle down that way when we were down around Höyük and so forth. So, is this breed still common?
So, you mean now?
Yes.
No, this size of aurochs, it's not common anymore because they are all domesticated and this is wild. And because of the domestication, the size of cattle and other animals like pig, it's quite small compared with the wild. And the ecology and the paleo environment was quite different in that time period. So it's normal that the size of the animals are bigger.
Okay, if there are no more further questions, then I would like to thank both the audience online and here in the room for being with us and for enjoying, I think, the lecture on the Central Anatolian prehistoric animals. So Özlem will continue working on them, and maybe next year we can have further developed. So for now, thank you very much. And for all of you here in the room, we would like to invite you to join us for a glass of wine and something to go with the wine. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Have a nice day for you on the